Hey guys, this is Travis, and I just wanted to quick come here. I'm here at the kitchen table, and just wanted to touch base with you guys about a few things going on with the book. Mainly using using Facebook Live right now just to talk about the book. So if you see me on Facebook Live, you should pretty much just assume that I am here on the talking about the book. So that's what's going on. Wanted to just quick um, talk a little bit again, remind everybody that um, the book is available for pre-order on Kindle today. So if you want to go out, I'll post a link when we get done with this to the Amazon page. If you've been wanting to get it on Kindle, we'll give you a place where you can do that. But the bigger announcement is, and you guys have heard this already as well, is that on um, March 4th is when the actual paperback is going to be available. So if you're big into having a physical book in your hands that you can read, March 4th is when you're going to be able to go out and do it. Now, why am I waiting until March 4th? Okay, great question. Amazon is all about trends and, who's moving up and who's moving down. And so we're trying to get as many people as we can to get out there and order the book on March 4th, just so that we can, push ourselves up and get a little more visibility on Amazon. So you don't have to help us with the book's launch. You don't have to buy the book if you don't want to. But if it's something that interests you and you do want to participate in the book, we would love to have you join us on March 4th ordering the book. That will help us out, and hopefully that gives us a little visibility so other people can check us out and see what's going on. So that's that piece. So I wanted to talk for a minute today. I almost forgot. The other big thing is on Thursday, I'm going to guess probably around 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. I'm going to have my good buddy Sean Hughley jump on Facebook Live with me and interview me about the book. And so Sean has been an advocate of this since day one. He was part of our house churches early on. He's read an advanced copy. He's reading it again. And I just think it's going to be exciting to have somebody who's been part of this with us jump on, ask some questions. And so if you've been interested, but you're really like, what's this about? Maybe jump on Facebook on March 4th with us about 7 o'clock, and we'll talk a little more about what the book is about. Okay? So that's happening Thursday night, March 4th. We're going to jump on, and we'll have a lot of fun. Sean's a great interviewer, loves to talk. He and I are kind of fun to sit around and listen to. So love it if you guys could join us for that. So now to hear what I'm really here to talk about. I wanted to talk a little bit because I don't talk in the book about it in the book, and sometimes people, don't even know that we're doing house churches because this has been such a closely guarded secret. I wanted to talk about why and how we got into house churches in the first place. So some of you know the book is all about starting house churches and how to do that and why to do that. And I wanted to share my why with you guys. So in 2002, some of you know this, Christy and I, we moved down to Kansas City. We were dating at the time. We weren't married yet. And so when we were moving down to Kansas City, we were looking for a church to join. And we fell in just through a series of circumstances with this church that was awesome. We loved them. We still love them. And they had a bunch of small groups that were meeting that they called house churches. And the leader of that group at the time, he came up to me and he said, "Hey, if you want to be involved in what we're doing, we need you to get involved in a house church." And so Chris and I are like, okay. And we jumped in and joined the house church. And it was no big deal. It functioned a lot like a small group in a typical larger church. Most of you guys might be familiar with small groups and what those are. So we were there with them for a while. And then the leaders came back to us and they said, "Hey, we are going to transition. We feel like the Lord is calling us to transition to just being an only house church network. And so our house churches are going to be where you guys get together to talk about the Bible, to worship together, to help each other and encourage one another. And we're going to get rid of our Sunday morning service. And I go, what do you think about that? And to be honest, I was like, I don't know if I like that idea. And I struggled with that idea. I'd always been part of a larger church that had preaching and teaching and really good worship. And so I didn't know how that was going to work and what that would mean. And at the time, we had just stepped out and started our own house church with this church that we were part of. And so they came to us as leaders of one of the house churches. They're like, are you up for this? And my honest answer was no, but the answer I gave them was, well, okay, yeah, we're in it because we're in it with you guys and we're in this for the long haul. So we're part of this house church that's meeting, and I don't remember what night, kind of in my mind, I think it was a Tuesday night every week that we were meeting. But what happened was God took this ragtag group of people who, I mean, it was me and my roommates and a buddy of mine and Christy and her roommates. When Christy at the time, she was living with a single mom of four daughters. And during that season, God just made all of us like family. We started to hang out all the time. We didn't just get together to teach the Bible and worship. We were constantly in each other's lives, sharing the knowledge that we had and hanging out and eating together. And the single mom that Christy was living with, her daughters, we would watch her daughters and be involved in their lives. And over time, that year, this house church actually became like our family in Kansas City. Okay. And so then what happened next was kind of crazy. So we'd known that we were going to move back here to Cedar Rapids and come back to Cedar Rapids. But there was this retreat towards the end of that year. And at that retreat, we were just talking about different things that the Lord had done. We were there a whole weekend and lots of stuff had gone on, really cool stuff. But we'd been there that whole week or that weekend. And the last session of that retreat, the leader stands up and he says, hey, I want to know what God has been doing in your guys' lives this weekend. And Christy's roommate, the mother of the four girls, she stood up and she said, she goes, hey, this week is, and she points to her one of her daughters. This week is my daughter's birthday. And I asked her while we were here this weekend, I go, would you rather be home with dad? Because they'd been divorced. It was a new divorce. And she was worried about the impact. And her daughter, the mom says, her daughter looked at her and she goes, no, Mom. I miss dad. I want to be with dad. And then she starts naming off the guys in our house church. She said, Travis and Dave and Paul, and just starts going through the names of guys the men in our house church. She's like, these guys have become really important to me, like a dad to me. And as that happens, like everybody in the room, right? There's not a dry eye in the room. Everybody's kind of weeping and realizing what the Lord has done in bringing us together, and forging us into this makeshift ragtag little family that loved each other and supported one another and did life together. And it was so different than so many of the other things that we had done in the past. And I didn't know at that point because, like I said, Christy and I would come back and we'd move back here to Cedar Rapids and become part of our more traditional church again for a season. But looking back, it was that moment. And whenever I tell anybody about why we do house churches, I always talk about that moment where it became evident that we just weren't people going to church together. We had become family. And if you think about what can be so missing sometimes in our Christian experience, um, it's not teaching, or it's not worship. Sometimes we have those in spades, but sometimes what's missing is this spiritual family dynamic that causes us to live life together and be part of each other's lives and support one another. And so that was really the turning point for me in whether I was going to do house churches or not. When that moment happened, I didn't even know it at that moment, but something had set inside of me where we had pressed past becoming just people who were part of a church together, and we were family. And everything I've done since then has been to continue to try and build that in other people. So that's kind of my story about how I got into house churches. I don't tell that in the book. That's just extra. But I thought maybe just in the sense of, people wanting to know why I'm doing this book and why it's so important, that might be something that people are interested in. Okay, one last thing. I want to talk about why I wrote this book. Okay. Now, lots of people write books for lots of reasons, but the reason I wrote this book is I actually believe there are a whole bunch of people that are sitting in a pew or are part of a church, and it's time to do something different. It's time to actually launch out into the thing God's called you to. And I think for a lot of people, they don't really realize that they've actually been called to this kind of spiritual family reality that I've been describing. That God has called them to form spiritual families and help be spiritual fathers and mothers to people who maybe they've met and maybe they've never met, right? Part of this book is so many times I've been talking to people about house churches, and it's like they want to gather their 5 Christian friends and hug them and never let them go. And I think that that's great, but I actually think that house churches are an amazing way to reach out to people who have never been part of a church before. The easiest way to get people to come to Christ is to invite them to experience spiritual family. I believe that there are people out there that are hungry for it. I believe that the church is hungry for it, and that inviting them into that is just an amazing way to actually reach their hearts for Jesus. They get to see the kind of fellowship. Jesus called us to the kind of fellowship that lays down our lives for each other. And he said that they would know that we're Christians by our love for one another. And some of the easiest ways to invite believers to follow Jesus is for them to see that supernatural dimension of love playing out between us. So the book is actually, I always envisioned it as a short little pamphlet that I could hand to somebody, and I could say, here, take this and do this. And it would say to them, hey, not only should you start a house church, yes, you should, but if you start a house church, here's how to do it. And I could stick it in their hands. And, I have conversations with people like this all the time, but this would be another thing that after I have a conversation with them, I could stick it in their hands, and they would just be able to take this and run with it. And I really believe that God is raising up people who are going to start house churches here in Iowa, in other states across the country, in other countries of the world. And that, it's time. And this book isn't just how-to. There's plenty of how-to books out there. I didn't want to write another how-to book. I actually wrote a you should book, a quick pamphlet saying you should do this. And you're going to run into people that need this book or need someone to help them kind of talk through the excuses and the things that stall them out. And this book is going to be a great book just to give to somebody who's in that spot, and it helps them move from sitting there not really using the gifts God's calling them to use, into moving into the things God's called them into. I really think it's important that this book isn't just read, but it's acted on and shared with others. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. If you're so generous and you buy a copy of this book, read it, and hopefully you do what's inside. But I also hope that you take the book and you pass it on to somebody else. And I don't care if we make a lot of money in the book. The point of the book is not to make money. The point of the book is let's start starting house churches among people who need them, among people who are far away from Jesus, who might never get a chance to know him, except that there's a small church that meets on their block or a small church that meets nearby where they work, that can help them find Jesus and become a disciple. So that's why we're writing. That's what all the excitement's about. I hope you guys can just join me in on March 4th, buying the book or watching the live stream and just hear a little bit more about it. And thanks everyone for your support, and we hope to talk to you soon. Love you guys. Bye.